wrestlers who passed away in the year 2024. I'm coming to you live from beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Horseman Country, and I am joined as always by the man who is the godfather of the Hannibal TV, Hannibal himself. Hannibal, welcome, sir.
The Carolina is home of the King of Connecticut, your buddy and my
Yes.
buddy.
Isn't he in Florida, though?
I think he moved to Florida, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's all over the place.
He's ubiquitous. So do you have big plans for the ball dropping, et cetera, whatever happens out there in Wichita?
Just working. I'm training and working and plowing ahead, eating healthy, and just focusing on a great 2025, ending 2024 strong. We got over 15,000 new subscribers in December 2024, which is a record number of subscribers for us in a month. But we're going to kind of end it on a sad note today because we're doing our weekly discussion here about wrestling, and we'll end it by talking about wrestlers that have passed. And there was a lot that we liked. I'll just answer this one UFO question since we have all these UFO fans on here. I believe the drones are from the government. Yes, I do believe they are from the government. The orbs, I really don't know. They could be further black government craft, or they could be foreign government craft, or they could be visitors. I'm not sure, but I want to find out more. Jack, you could give us your opinion.
I don't know. There's just been so much information and disinformation, information. The one that I found the most disturbing was the fact that the government was using these drones to search for radioactive material, maybe a stray nuclear weapon, and that would explain why they were going at night and looking for heat signatures and that sort of thing. I definitely don't believe that they fall under the rubric of alien craft, but it's either the United States government or some foreign entity. I also don't believe, and I don't know what your opinion is on this, but it's just too much of a concentration to be all of a sudden, a million drone enthusiasts, and I'm exaggerating, launching these crafts. What do you think the most plausible theory is?
Well, I think definitely there was some unusual activity going on because it seems to have slowed down a lot in recent weeks since the FAA bans have happened. But also, supposedly, if it was foreign or there was mischievous stuff going on or nefarious, as they like to say, they did supposedly send better weapons to take care of them to the military bases where these incursions were happening. And they're not going to tell us if they're shooting anything down or not in most cases. And just like the mayor of New Jersey, one of the mayors of New Jersey's told me, if the police shoot one down, it's a criminal investigation. So they're not going to advertise it either. So who knows? It's a mystery. There's definitely UAPs out there, though, whether they're associated with this or not. And there was multiple craft out there. But we will talk more about that with future UFO guests that I have a lot coming up in the coming weeks. There were a lot up there, really high up, higher up than your normal drones would go for sure. But who are we going to talk about of the dead wrestlers first? Oops. I'm sorry. I kicked myself out.
No worries. I think I'll just, before we leave the drone topic one time, I know you're not one to toot your own horn, but the Hannibal TV, in addition to being Canada's #1 pro wrestling and combat sports channel, is also been on the cutting edge of UFO coverage. In fact, that's been a long-standing interest of yours and a staple. And I think the fans that have recently joined the channel due to this coverage should stay tuned, because Hannibal will continue to address that in the weeks and months to come.
Yeah, the probably not too obvious secret is I like that topic better than wrestling these days. I'm kind of bored with modern wrestling, although I still like the classic wrestling. So I'm actually happy that there's more attention to that topic. But the wrestlers we're going to be dealing with today, other than a few that died far too young, are mostly classic wrestlers.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those years where there were far too many. There's some real legends in this list, and others that made their mark, so to speak. And always sad when you see a list of, and I should say we've got 13 individuals on this particular rundown, but that's by no means an exhaustive dissertation on every single wrestler, obviously in the business that has passed, but it's something that we whittled down based on a number of criteria, mostly in terms of their impact nationally. I know there were several regional talents that passed away, and that's sad. And all due respect to them, but I think we'll start off, Hannibal, with a man who we at Cheap Heat Productions, Morris Shorthall. I want to shout him out over in Ireland. Happy New Year, my friend. We got the last interview with him, and that was Ice Train, otherwise known as M.I. Smooth. He passed away January 23rd at 58. Harold Hogue is his name, and senior, and the cause is still not listed. He wrestled his last match in 2019. What do you remember about the big man Ice Train?
Sadly, all I remember from him is really it seemed like he always wrestled Scott Norton. I know they did more with him in WCW, but it seemed like he always wrestled Norton. And that time after he did the Cheap Heat interview, he was supposed to do one with me, but he was one of these very flaky guys that kept no-showing and changing dates, like a lot of them. So I do remember listening to a few of his recent podcasts, preparing for the one he was supposed to do with me. And again, that would have ultimately been the last one before he died. But yours, which is also on Cheap Heat and the Hannibal TV, if you search up Ice Train, he was talking a lot about still being able to bench like 600 to 800 pounds and how jacked he was. And that puts a lot of weight on your heart. And who knows if it's natural or not to be able to put up that kind of weight, but that's pretty young to die. So never met him. Wish I could have done an interview with him, but for whatever reason, it never happened.
Yeah, my experience with him was quite positive. You could tell even at his age, he still had a love for the business and was quite proud of his accomplishments in WCW. Being down in this area, I remember seeing him on TBS first run, and he had that great tag team with Scott Norton, Fire and Ice, and quite a physique, quite a power lifter. So that is, I agree. That's too young in this day and age to die. Next, a true legend passed, a man that is quite controversial to this day in the industry, and that would be Ole Anderson. He passed at 81 on February 26th. The cause of death was not released per se, but he was diagnosed for a number of years, I think 2007 ish, with MS. He was, in addition to a member of the Minnesota Wrecking Crew with Gene Anderson. And I want to shout out Brad Anderson, an individual who's done a couple of interviews on this channel as well. He's Gene's son, having some health issues lately. I want to say Happy New Year to him. Great guy. But Ole was well known for his time as a booker in Georgia, Championship Wrestling, Jim Crockett Promotions, and of course his status as one of the original Four Horsemen. He was last on the national scene in 1996 when he was fired, released, what have you, from WCW when Eric Bischoff came into power. He was apparently demoted to the power plant where he was doing some training, and there's some mythology around what happened there. But one of the greatest wrestling books I have ever read in terms of knowledge of the business and his booking philosophy. He was a very intelligent guy, and I know controversial, but you cannot you cannot dispute the fact that the man is a legend.
He had some very funny shoot interviews. I wish I could have interviewed him, but supposedly he saved his money very well. One of the things that I heard in one of his interviews around the time that he passed that stood out to me is one of his regrets, and I don't know if he said this in the book or not, was that he was really rude when he was initially offered a job by Vince and Linda McMahon, not realizing that the power of pay-per-view and what their initial plan was. So he kind of regretted ultimately never doing any work for Vince and Linda. He's probably most famous to modern fans as the voice of the Shockmaster. Sadly, he was also the voice just a couple years before that of the Black Scorpion, which was also funny because that was another mystery guy, like not even really long enough ago to forget about the voice, and here's this funny voice appearing again. Which I guess, as great of a booker as he was, maybe he just given up by the time WCW came around with some of those weird early 90s WCW gimmicks, but memorable. And who could forget Sid's reaction to the Shockmaster? And I'm not going to jump forward to Sid, but Sid actually managed to be, I think, the only one that didn't laugh during that whole Shockmaster debacle. Oh, sorry, you froze for a second there. Greetings, Isbin. Jack is on hotel Wi-Fi there in
I think
Myrtle
I'm back,
Beach.
unless.
Yeah, I can hear you now. I won't take myself out again in
Okay, I
case it's
apologize for
that.
that. Yeah,
Oh,
Ole did comment in his book that one of his worst regrets was telling Vince to go F himself, and then Linda as well. So that's a true story.
yeah, I mean, I heard him say it, and just a funny guy. I don't know if it was Rob Feinstein that he did that one interview with where he's really cranky, arguing about absolutely everything, but it was one of those old school shoot interviewers. So my next interview is going to be Scotty Riggs. I'm also interviewing Lance Von Erich, and that's going to be an in-person one, doing very soon.
Yeah. Next is a Canadian legend that I don't know if you've had a chance to, or you ever interviewed him, Hannibal, but I think John Paz did, and that's Paul the Butcher Vachon, who passed in February at age 86 of various health issues.
Yeah, one of our local promoters, Jeff here, mentioned that a former Great North Wrestling sponsor, Dale Sands of Goodfellas Tree Care, which I remember the logo. I think they sponsored one of the Smith Falls events. Rest in peace, Dale. Paul Vachon, I remember mostly as a WWE jobber and doing that wedding thing where he got married. I was a big fan of Mad Dog Vachon. The main thing that stands out to me about Paul Vachon, and this is a weird story. I met Paul Vachon at the 2004 Cauliflower Alley, which was the first Cauliflower Alley I attended. And I'm glad I attended it because it was the only time I ever met Vern Gagne too. And I was actually in a battle royal on the wrestling show that day. And I think Nick Bockwinkel was the one that told me what to do in that battle royal. So that was pretty cool. I also remember beating somebody up in the training camp that Bruce told me to beat up because he was bragging about being some type of martial arts guy. But anyways, I won't digress into that. But I'm talking about Bruce Hart. He was at that one too and involved in they did like a training camp. But I met him there. But weirdly, like sometime around, maybe it was 2016-ish, maybe 2015, Great North Wrestling was very popular in a town called Hawkesbury, Ontario, and there was a guy from Hawkesbury that was doing a Mad Dog Vachon movie, or doing a Paul Vachon movie at that time. Paul Vachon, strangely enough. and he actually drove like from where he lived an hour and 15 minutes to meet me, and we went out to eat something, and he told me this big plan. He wanted to do a Paul Vachon show before he died, a tribute to Paul Vachon in Hawkesbury before he died. And then the guy, I was saying, I was sure, I was up open for it, let's get it going. And then I never heard anything from him again. So it's too bad that never happened. I would have loved to have done that. And I think in that town, that's what was one of our most popular towns. Sadly, they have a horrible mayor there now that thinks wrestling is below the town. But it's too bad that that never happened, because I would have liked to have done that for Paul. And I believe was Luna related to Paul, or was that Mad Dog? Either
No,
way, it was his niece, right?
yeah, I think it was his niece.
Who was
Yeah.
Vivian? Was Vivian the sister of Paul?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. That Vivian Vachon wrestling movie was also good, and Paul's featured in that. And I remember, I think Mad Dog Vachon's last match in Montreal, didn't he team with Paul at the Paul Sauve Arena or something? I don't know. I remember seeing that, but I was never a Paul Vachon fan. I respect. I am a fan of Mad Dog. He's my favorite Canadian wrestler of all time. And probably one of the toughest wrestlers of all time. Him and Haku would definitely be debatable. Definitely, Mad Dog actually went to the Olympics, so he wasn't just known for street fighting. But Paul Vachon, uh, he did. I guess his most notable thing was that wedding he did on Saturday night's main event, which I guess may have been a legit wedding, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm. Well, next is what you could say a household name from the golden era of professional wrestling. Mike Jones, also known as Soul Train Jones Vincent, and of course Virgil, the bodyguard of the $1 million man, Ted DiBiase. He passed in February at the age of 72. He apparently had two strokes and actually had dementia, unfortunately, in 2022, and had colon cancer. So he had a variety of issues. And in later years, the internet years, he became famous or infamous for the Lonely Virgil meme and setting up his gimmick table basically anywhere. I guess he wasn't well off financially, but he really was a integral part of that $1 million man package, and I guess got some heat towards the end for his appearances by advertising himself and Ted, and it was only Ted, but certainly one we all remember from childhood, wouldn't you say, Hannibal?
His managers, who actually ran his Twitter, the Megan Boys, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, they're your classic carny type wrestling promoters. So I don't know who was actually responsible for doing those type of advertisements, but I wouldn't put it past any of them. And they actually prevented me from interviewing both Virgil and the Iron Sheik in person, because it didn't match with whatever they were doing. I know that at the time of the Iron Sheik, they were doing an Iron Sheik movie, and the main thing was they cut off potential paydays those guys would have got. I did interview Virgil in later years through the captain, and there's, I think, 3 or 4 total interviews of Virgil on the Hannibal TV. I can see why he was kept around, because supposedly he was reliable. So he would show up and do the jobs. Apparently, he was never a teacher, which is definitely, I believe that, because anyone that was supposedly a teacher would have ended up more like Tito Santana than Virgil. Tito saved his money, is well off at retirement. Virgil made decent money. And particularly in WCW, I guess in the 90s, 150,000 a year in the 90s for numerous years. I mean, that's good money. He could still get decent pay on the indies for a long time after that. So he definitely, something happened there where his money wasn't saved. I don't know the reason, but at least he's out of his pain, because he was living with a fan towards the end. And there
Yes.
is a video on this channel that the fan sent me, because I was trying to help with the GoFundMe, where he gives the tour of where he was living at the end. If you look up Virgil tours his house, and I mean this was pretty low living. But I guess from the stories, if you hear about Marty Jannetty and like the stories about his whatever you want to call it, his whatever God blessed him with, he had his fun in his life. And certainly, man, when you're working with the $1 million man at a time when WWE is paying the $1 million man to live rich, and you're on the road with him for years, you can't feel too bad for Virgil in the end. He lived a pretty amazing life.
Yeah, I'd say he had a good run. Next is the first of two Hall of Famers. Sika, NOI, one half of the Wild Samoans. He passed in June, sorry, and he was a three-time WWF Tag Team Champion. Worked New Japan, had a good run, actually a couple of good runs in Mid South and Georgia, and actually debuted in Stampede in 1973. And then we'll also add, unfortunately, his brother Afa NOI, who died at the age of 80, August the 16th, of a heart attack. He had a solo run in the WWF, some of us remember, and he also managed Rikishi, the Head Shrinkers, Samu. So two Hall of Famers, and definitely a real Hall of Fame tag team with a very interesting story about how they got into the business, which I'm sure you know, Hannibal.
Yeah, I don't know how much of that is folklore or not because you never know in wrestling. The Wild Samoans were really before my time, although I know Sika. I think Sika wrestled on a couple Saturday night main events here and there. I remember Alpha managing the Head Shrinkers. He certainly trained some of the best wrestlers and had some of the best connections ever in wrestling. And what a long way the Samoans have come in wrestling from doing the wild savage gimmick to now like they're overflowing wrestling, and they're definitely considered like Roman Reigns might be the other than The Rock, who's also I think Samoan. I mean, two of the coolest guys in wrestling are The Rock and Roman Reigns. So I mean that's quite a heritage, and I've never met any of the Samoans I didn't like. So, and I'm not just saying that because they're real tough, and you don't want to mess with them either. And I heard that about Sika and Afa, but they're good guys. From I've never heard anything bad about them.
Never. And apparently they were so tough in San Francisco when they went as fans to see the matches at the Cow Palace that allegedly, and somebody probably Ibzan will correct me, Pat Patterson said, we should train you guys, and that's how they broke into the business. But yes, what a absolute legacy they have left with the state of Samoan wrestlers in the business right now. Next is a man who had a brief but famous run in the WWE, Akabono, who was 54. He passed in April of heart failure. He was the first non-Japanese legit Yokozuna sumo champion. And of course, he, in 2005, wrestled 3 matches in the WWE, including that WrestleMania 21 sumo match against the Big Show that he triumphed in. And I don't know about you, Hannibal, but show in the sumo gear is a visage I'll never forget.
I am not a Big Show fan beyond what he did in WCW as a person or as a wrestler. I can't say I know much about Akibono other than he went into MMA, made a lot of money after in Japan, didn't do that great. I'm not a big fan of Japanese wrestling. I remember hearing about that WrestleMania and seeing highlights. I was surprised that they put Big Show to lose against Akibono, but because a lot of people didn't know who Akibono was. That's the main thing I remember. It was like when they had Tenru and Hand Towel or whatever his name was lose to Demolition.
Katao.
I was like Katao. Um, like what the hell? It just left me thinking why, but I don't know. I'm sorry to hear about his passing, but I understand he lived a pretty good life overall, was extremely famous in Japan. So, R.I.P.
Yeah, and I would say that around that time, WWE was definitely not booking Big Show in the best, and took a lot away from his aura. Our next person is one, Hannibal, that I'm familiar with, you're familiar with. He managed you in one of his last management appearances for Great North Wrestling for our 15th anniversary show, and I would be talking about none other than the Taskmaster, Games Master, Prince of Darkness himself, Kevin Sullivan, who passed at 74 on August the 9th. And apparently, and you can fill in the blanks on this, he suffered an accident in May at a signing, and had a leg issue that they were able to save, but then he unfortunately came down with sepsis and encephalitis. His final match, which I talked to him about, was in 2019 against Brian Pillman Jr. But my God, this man has a legacy in the business that'll never be forgotten, from his gimmick in Florida that was certainly controversial and groundbreaking, right through to his career. I personally enjoyed him managing the Varsity Club. I thought that was one heck of an underrated stable, and then his booking success in WCW when they took it to WWE. But in terms of his appearance in Great North Wrestling, I got to spend some time with him and pick his brain. And you cannot argue that this man is a legend and should be in any Hall of Fame that there is. And I know you knew Kevin well.
Yeah, I also was in. This is his very last wrestling promo, and it's only a minute, so let's just go ahead and show his final wrestling promo. And this was for an event that you ended up promoting that neither Kevin and I were on due to health issues that I was going through at the time, and him. So let's just play the final promo.
I can hear them screaming already in Smith Falls. They knew July 15th. They thought he was gone. But just like anything else, he has risen, and risen with more power, more destructive force. The only thing I worry about in Smith Falls, who's got the cojones to get in the ring with the Blood Hunter? Tonight, 2 people fall and may not get up for a while. They were destroyed, they were taken apart, and this is just a warm-up. July 15th, Smith Falls. I'm going to let him go 100%.
So there you go. That was actually the last promo Kevin Sullivan ever did. So what an honor that is for me. And I think when he managed me on that show earlier that night, that was the last time he ever managed. And I was actually 100% the last guy he ever managed regular over, I mean, it wasn't that many years, but over the course of about 3 or 4 years, he managed me a handful of times, which was cool. But he was also one of my biggest supporters. He was one of my biggest supporters over the years. And pretty much almost any match of the Blood Hunters, he came up with the finish of it. So I liked taking finishes and ideas from Kevin. But definitely that whatever happened to him at the end there may have been what put him over the edge. But you knew from seeing him, he was in a lot of pain, and he was there some days more than others. And sometimes I think some of the pain medication or other health medications he was on affected his memory, from what I could tell. But yeah, I think overall, I was always happy. Like I show this we always used to eat sushi together. Some of my best memories are eating sushi with Kevin Sullivan because we both really like sushi. So I did like the guy a lot. not to the extent of the relationship I had with Billy Graham, but I mean, Kevin and Billy were two major mentors to me. And all I can say is my third mentor actually probably deserves to have died a long time ago, Abdul the Butcher. And why are the two that are better human beings gone and the scumbag one still there? I don't know. But who knows? But God bless Billy and Kevin.
Yeah, at least Kevin did. He did that excellent series with John Paz that airs on the channel here, Taskmaster Talks, where he shared his wealth of knowledge. And I asked him at the time, like, why it was that he wasn't in a major creative role, even consulting for someone like Mr. Khan in AEW, because he definitely could have made a significant contribution. But I guess Tony never called. But man, his legacy will be undeniable.
The sad thing is, and I don't even know if you ever know this, but there's a guy that's got a lot of people hired in AEW, including Swerve, that at one point, due to some controversies that got resolved and straightened out since, but at one point they were actually thinking of bringing the Blood Hunter with Kevin Sullivan into AEW. But sadly, a bunch of stuff happened that wasn't true. And I ended up getting cleared of, but it affected that happening. And at one point, as I said, a guy that's ended up getting a lot of people hired in AEW was going to try and get both Kevin and I, but due to some false things that are now cleared, that didn't happen. But that would have been cool.
And Cody Rhodes ducking the Blood Hunter. Let's not forget that as well.
Yeah, I know. I think that was before the Blood Hunter existed. But yeah, I mean, Kevin. The one thing is weird about Kevin. I think he knew he was going to pass, because the one thing I'll say about these John interviews, which I bought them all. We have a relationship, a collaboration relationship with John and I, and this is actually airing on John's channel too. But as far as the John interviews with Kevin, like, I don't want to call him brown nosing to WWE, but he was like over the top, putting WWE over to the point where nobody in their right mind could say that this stuff is true. Either he didn't watch it and is just saying nice things, or there was something weird, like for someone that's going to put over a company that much and say everything's so great and it's the best he's ever seen. It's a little weird. I mean, in the same year, I think he said CM Punk was the greatest of all time and Triple H was the greatest of all time. So again, I don't know if that's the mental health forgetfulness, but it's just too bad. For as much as he put WWE over, and it seemed like he was either trying to either mend the fences to make sure his legacy gets put over well, which by the way, Triple H tweeted when he died, but it just seemed like it's too bad for how much he was putting them over that he never got used either as a consultant or put under a Legends deal or something to give him a bit more money at the end. But he did get a lot of GoFundMe money towards the end, so that's good. And he was still working, managing, doing podcasts, doing autograph appearances right up until the end as well. But it would have been nice to get like that Jake the Snake AEW money where he's getting paid to do seemingly nothing for years, but for some reason it happens with some better than others.
Yeah, and one of my favorite podcast moments of the last probably 5 years, I don't know whether he was speaking to John or you, Hannibal, where he in mid conversation got up and relieved himself while the stream was happening. Do you recall that, Jen?
That was hilarious. That was absolutely hilarious. And I think it was with me. I'm almost positive it was with me, where he just started peeing. And again, I'll say one more thing, and I hate to always bring up SW Fury, but I know we have a bunch of Texas people. For some reason, one of the big mistakes that I know some of the owners even agree with now, there was 4 owners, 5 if you want to count Lacey Von Erich at one point. But I know at least many of the 4 original ones agree. 3, I would say, of the 4 at least agree that they should never have put Teddy Long as the co-booker of that promotion with Kevin Sullivan, because it had so much buzz with Kevin Sullivan booking it, and Teddy's ideas were horrible overall. And I think if they had just gone with Kevin and just let him do the whole thing, it wouldn't have had the messy end that it ended up having. And it may have still be going in some capacity today. So it's too bad about that, because Kevin was writing the TV show for that company, and during COVID, it had quite a buzz about it. But again, and Kevin was also, I admit he wasn't doing commentary that great. He was also on commentary, but one of the funniest memories about Kevin was when Justin Credible wrestled me drunk and pilled up on one of the shows there and changed the finish in the match. Surprise, surprise, he was inebriated for a match. By the way, he looks like he's gained about another 130, 150 pounds in recent years. He looks like he has triplets coming. But after he was apologizing to Kevin for changing the finish and saying, "Don't worry, when we get back to the hotel, I'll order you a pizza." And Kevin was also driving with Andrew Anderson, who is a good friend of Kevin, and Kevin got him booked in lots of places. And I guess Andrew and Kevin were sharing rooms, and when they got to the hotel, Credible was like, "Okay, I'm going to order this pizza, and then I'm going to bring you the pizza when it comes." And by the way, Credible hadn't even washed the blood off his face from wrestling me. He still had the blood. And by the way, we were before intermission, I think, or shortly after. So there, an hour and a half had passed, and he had not bothered to wash the blood off his face or do any first aid to himself. So he goes, I guess he passed out in the room because Andrew goes down to the room because Kevin and Andrew are hungry. And he opens the door, and he still has the blood on his face and his clothes. And he's like, "Oh, I must have passed out. Sorry." And they're like, "We've been waiting half an hour for this pizza that you said you were going to buy us because you felt bad for changing the match." I just remember Kevin was so pissed about that.
Yeah, he certainly continues to struggle. Unfortunately, just incredible. But Kevin Sullivan will maybe gone, but he'll never be forgotten. Our next person wasn't a wrestler per se, but made a big splash in WWF during the Attitude Era. But most notably, he's known as Charlie Hustle Pete Rose, who passed at the age of 84 in September via a heart attack. He captained what was known as the Big Red Machine, Cincinnati Reds, to World Series wins in 75 and 76. But he appeared in 3 WrestleManias and had an ongoing thing with Kane, and even got a memorable stink face from Rikishi. I think that was WrestleMania 2000. Do you remember those highly entertaining pieces of WrestleManias with Mr. Rose?
I'll be honest, I remember seeing the highlights, but I had pretty much started losing interest in wrestling by that time as far as watching the actual pay-per-views. I guess he's one of the Hall of Famers, quote unquote, that has done more in wrestling than others. I don't remember what Drew Carey ever did, but I guess one of the things is Pete Rose is one of the first ones that really started diluting the Hall of Fame by putting the celebrity wing in. Some of them deserve it, like Zeus. I'm still waiting for them to put Zeus in there, but I don't really follow baseball and know much about baseball, so I know he did something really bad as far as betting on games, I think, which is a big problem in sports, yeah. So, I don't know, I think it just made the Hall of Fame more of a joke. But I do like Kane, so good for Kane getting the rub off of Pete Rose.
And next is a man that I had an opportunity to interview. I know you interviewed him as well, and he was best known for that really memorable Beyond the Mat film where he appeared with Mike Modest, who we've also spoken to. Tony Jones. He was known as the Shooter. Tony Jones. He passed in April at the age of 53. It was an unexpected death, and apparently it was a heart attack. You interviewed Tony a few years ago, correct?
I think I interviewed him 3 times total, and one of it was one of my first interviews, which was even an audio interview, and there's not that many audio interviews of me on here when I first was starting the channel. What I remember most about Tony, he was one of the first quote, like, if you want to consider him someone known in wrestling, because that Beyond the Mat was pretty popular. I remember like he was one of the first known wrestlers to like know who I was as a wrestler. So I think he reached out to me on Facebook about something, and I was shocked that, oh, Tony Jones knows who I am. That's my main memory of him, because I was like, at that time, I was like marking out. I'm like, how does this guy know who I am?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like a Canadian indie wrestler. And then we became, wouldn't say friends, but we stayed in communication. He seemed like a good guy. Flaky at times too, though. A few times he, again, I'm not holding this against him. He's still a nice guy, but I don't like necessarily people that say they're going to do interviews and then you plan your day around doing an interview with them, and then they just don't show up and you don't hear from them for 2 or 3 days. Then they say, oh, sorry, let's do it another day. And again, that takes nothing away from him being a nice guy. And I'm sorry that he lost his daughter too. I know it was a hard issue, and again, I'll remember it as like one of the first famous wrestlers, which to me at that time he was famous, that I was like marking out for, that like somebody that's been in a famous wrestling movie had heard of me. So
yeah, definitely one of the highlights of Beyond the Mat was his tryout with Mike Modest and that exchange that that JR had with him about his singlet. But yeah, he once flaked out on me, but was apologetic and rescheduled. But definitely a really nice guy to interview. Next is
you just get fed up with it after a while when you've been in this business as long as I have, I guess, because that's a regular thing in wrestling.
Yep.
And that's why one thing I will say about Vince Russo, and with a lot of the wrestlers who have actually made it, and again, this might be one of the reasons why he never made it. I don't know. But like the ones that will actually show up on time and keep appointments and stuff are the ones overall that will make it. Like when I was amazed that Kurt Angle was like a few minutes early when I went to interview him, but there'll be other guys that were low card guys that will flake out on you 4 or 5 times before you ever get the interview. So it's like how much of reliability is actually a thing to get a push and keep a push in wrestling.
Yeah, and that's something that you've mentioned many times. You can see sometimes why, you know, those who made it were professional and show up on time or show up at all, because you're right. There's nothing worse than planning your day around it, doing the research, you know, psyching up for the interview, and then no shows.
Even Steve Austin, I'll tell you that even Steve Austin, who is one of the biggest stars ever, and I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of his, but at one point we did have a talk, and he's like, I'm going to call you at this point in time. And he called me at that point in time, right on the button. So again, we've always heard Austin's reliable. So even to a low guy like me, he's going to keep his word on like what time he's going to have a talk with me, which I actually thought that was cool.
Yeah, that's important no matter what business you're in, to be reliable. But again, it seems to be something that happens unfortunately too much in wrestling. But we'll continue to soldier on in order to bring the fans the content that you've come to know and love from the Hannibal TV. Next is a Mexican legend, father of Rey Mysterio, and that's Rey Mysterio Sr. He passed just this month at the age of 66. I didn't see a cause of death, but there was some speculation that it was cardiac related as well. And of course, one of the major stars in Mexico who was responsible for popularizing lucha libre, and then of course Rey Mysterio, Hall of Famer, did so much for the cruiserweight division, and former world champion.
Yeah, I'm just trying to double check if that's Rey Mysterio. Yeah, I think it's Rey Mysterio Jr.'s uncle and
Sorry.
Dominic Mysterio. Yeah,
Yeah, right,
great
right.
uncle of Dominic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to act like I know anything about Mexican wrestling other than Super Crazy is going to go down on May the 3rd at ECW Arena where Rey Mysterio Jr. wrestled a lot and has been mentioned earlier. He was going to be at that show. So looking forward to seeing you there. Isbin. That's going to be a lot of fun. May the 3rd. I'm training real hard for that. But yeah, sorry about the loss, but I can't pretend that I know anything about Mexican wrestling other than I'm going to beat up a Mexican wrestler in the spring.
And I should mention that that's going to happen despite the best efforts of Chubby Dudley to double cross us and stab us in the back by making it a no gimmicks match. But I think the fans that don't have their tickets for the TWA one and done event May 3rd in Philly get it, because you're gonna want to watch what Hannibal does to Super Crazy, who had so many classic matches in the ECW arena. But like all good things, it must come to an end. And yes, I apologize. I did know it was his uncle, not his father. But again, I'm like you. I don't really have too much interest in Mexican wrestling, and definitely less so now, given what you are about to do to one of the bona fide legends. Next is an individual who just died recently at the age of 43, former NWA world champion, suffered a heart attack Christmas Day and passed, and that would be Jack Stain, who was still a regular with the NWA promotion. A lot of shock at his passing, obviously, but he was obviously a very big guy with a lot of muscle mass, and that sometimes, unfortunately, lends itself to cardiac problems.
Yeah, and I think he was 48 actually.
Okay.
One thing is, I remember you always hear about the more recent NWA champions that they're kind of like not really that well known, and a lot of them don't even deserve to be able to say that they've held the title. And I remember thinking about that about Jack Stain before I met him, wondering who is this guy that held the NWA champion. But then I met him, and I'm like, oh, this guy. You can tell meeting him, he's tough. He has like the old school wrestler toughness and mystique to him. And I liked him as a wrestler. I guess he just didn't get an opportunity in one of the bigger leagues. I don't even know what's going on with the NWA now or who's the champion, but it's AEW pretty much killed any buzz that they had. And then when they went to the CW app, it's like you're going to take yourself off of social media to go to an app that hardly has any people on it. So I think that was a huge mistake. And now, again, I don't know what's going on, nor do I care. But I was sad to hear that. He had a really hot wife. Good for him. I remember that. I remember like being impressed with that. And I liked him as a guy. But I've never wrestled him. I would have liked to have wrestled him. But it's sad. Some wrestlers die young. I've come close a couple times. God isn't done with me yet. So I thank God that I'm alive. And I hope I make it to 48. I still got quite a ways to go to that age. But you never know. So count your blessings for every day you have and make the most of every day you have.
Yeah, I was interested in the NWA when they had the show on YouTube, and they did the throwback studio wrestling, and then they had some really good talent there. LA Knight was there as Eli Drake and others, and then it just seemed to kind of peter out. But Jack Stane was a staple. He had a good tag team with Blake Troop, an individual who, speaking of King of Connecticut, we interviewed him on Old School Shooters. He talks about Jack Stane in that podcast, and that is on this channel for those fans that are interested in checking it out.
Oh, and apparently that reminds me of the NWA, just to have a laugh. Didn't the TWA guy that runs it say that when they did their recent show in Philly, they were at Walmart earlier in the day giving people free tickets?
Yes.
So that's, what's his name again? Sorry, I forget.
Joel Goodhart?
Yes, Joel Goodhart. Joel Goodhart, who it's the Blood Hunter, I think, is done. Jeff, it's going to be Hannibal returning. I don't know. I may just wrestle here and there. I'm probably just going to wrestle here and there to get some aggression out and to motivate me to work out hard. And I've overcome some injuries. I should not have tried to wrestle last year. This year, I've really overcome my injuries. I wasn't ready last year. I had a couple really bad injuries, but one of the reasons I am in Wichita, Kansas right now is because I'm getting better medical treatment than I would in Canada. And I'm really focusing on healing myself, and I'm getting into, I can tell you guys right now, I am in better shape right now than when Kevin Sullivan managed me a few years ago, which was Kevin's last time managing me. So by May, there's going to be hell to pay for Super Crazy.
Yeah, and before we leave that topic, it makes me smile because as I've covered on this channel, Mr. Chubby Dudley thought that he got it over on us by making it a match that wasn't part of your forte, so to speak, and he would quote unquote handicap you, but again, they being Chubby and Joel are going to be responsible for what happens to Super Crazy, and it's not going to be pretty. So I'm looking forward to that too. And last but not least is a man who has I know a big history with Great North Wrestling. He's definitely a legend, a bona fide legend. Should be in every Hall of Fame that he's not right now. And I would be talking about Sid Vicious, Sid Justice, Psycho Sid, Udi. He passed in August at the age of 63 from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but he also previously battled congestive heart failure. And as we covered on the channel in in an interview with his final opponent, his last Great North Wrestling match was in 2017 against the Hebrew Hitman Paul Rosenberg. And we were in talks to bring him in this year, and unfortunately things didn't happen. But it was definitely something that we had bookmarked as a bucket list to bring him in again one last time to GNW, but it didn't happen. Hannibal, I know you knew Sid quite well, and was an extremely nice guy, family man. And from what I understand, a God-fearing Christian who did a lot of charity work that he didn't trumpet. So what a loss.
Yeah, and I understand it more because in the last 3 or 4 years, I've been trying to do an interview with him, and he kept putting it off, but he would still call me and talk to me on the phone because he's not really an internet guy, and he would talk to me to know the wrestling news because he liked hearing what was going on, but he'd rather just call somebody. Him and PCO were very good friends, and I became friends with him through PCO. I used him in Great North Wrestling on the very first Great North Wrestling event back in 2007. Used him numerous times in Great North Wrestling. Saw him at conventions over the years. Did 2 interviews with him. The last one I did with him was in Memphis, where I got to kind of hang out with him for half a day, which was a lot of fun. There's a video of us at Five Guys from that day. He was a farmer, very down to earth guy. He could have had a longer run. He didn't care. I know a lot of wrestling fans hold it against him, but he just didn't care about wrestling that much. He'd rather be with his family, playing softball and farming than wrestling in Madison Square Garden, unless they're going to pay him a lot and not give him any mental stress. He's the type of guy that when it became not fun, he's just like, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go play softball. So I actually respect him for that. Life is not all about wrestling. Ric Flair can bitch at him for going to play softball. How many of Sid's kids have died? Honestly, how many? And Sid has one wife. And like he was also a grandfather. So it's like make fun of him all you want. He also has a successful business, although I do think the cancer, I believe, may have been caused by some fertilizer that he may have been working with that led to him having cancer. And I'll always be so sad. And I don't even really want to talk about it now. The last time he called me, it was just like out of the blue that he called me. And I was so sad. I'm so sad thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because like I didn't know it would be the last time I ever talked to him. And he was so nice on the phone that day. And maybe he knew it was going to be the last time he ever talked to me. But yeah, he was a really nice guy.
Didn't I also thought that it was a bit of a shock to, well, it was a shock to the wrestling world because he was, he obviously didn't have the mass that he had in his prime, but he looked to be in good shape. He was, I believe, at a signing not 7 days before he passed. So I guess he kept his health issues private, and it was that much more of a shock that he passed when he did. But I agree with what you're saying about he had a good head on his shoulders for life in general. And I know there was some talk about him coming back in for another run. He made an appearance, I believe, was Raw, a 20. I probably don't have this correct, but 2012 ish, where he destroyed Heath Slater, and there was talk about him coming in for another run, but that never happened. But I don't think as you said, his life suffered from it, and he needs to be recognized formally in every Hall of Fame that there is to have.
Yeah, he's long overdue for the Hall of Fame, and a lot of people didn't like him because, for instance, for Ric Flair, Sid was a better negotiator. Flair was obviously never good, and I could be guilty of this too as a wrestling negotiator because I'm more like Flair, as in I don't care about the money. I just love to wrestle, and I'm about Terry Funk will tell you this is the same way. We're more about just the performance and stuff. And I know Flair held that against Sid and stuff, but Sid, I would put in one of he'd be in one of my top 10 nicest wrestlers I've met. Honest. He told you the truth. He told you how he felt. And also in wrestling, you got to suck up some of the best. You got to be a good politician. They call Triple H the game for a reason. And I'm not saying he wasn't talented, but part of the reason that he's made it as high as he has right now is because he's the ultimate politician. Sid was not a politician. He's an honest, out to earth guy. He is not a star. It did not have he was a star, but he had no attitude of a star either. He did not he would give anyone an autograph whether you paid him or not. Of course, he'd rather take the pay, but I've seen him sign autographs for people that have just come up with multiple things, and he doesn't say no. He'll just be like, okay, I'll sign it. Or famously, and I think I told this story, but I'll say it again. Some fans told me that they dared each other to stop by his house on their way to Raw in Memphis one night, thinking that he's just going to slam the door on his face. And he actually invites them in, talks to them for 5 or 10 minutes, and sends them on their way. So that's just a really nice guy.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as we said at the beginning of the hour, that it was a very rough year. We've lost some bona fide legends, and hopefully the year 2025 will be a little lighter on the passings. Do you? I guess I should ask you the stereotypical question. What is your New Year's resolution, Hannibal?
I just want to get this channel to 1 million subscribers by the end of 2025. And I'm putting the plans in motion for that to happen. This channel is going to be my main priority for the year 2025. And I'm really going to give it my all. So that's what this year is about, becoming a major player and just giving the fans what they want. And I appreciate this will be the last time for wrestling that I'll appear in 2024. So I thank all of you fans for all your continued support. I thank you, the new subscribers, for subscribing. Thanks, Jack, for all of your help over the years. John, everybody that's helped. Cheap Heat Productions, PCW Ultra, even those SWE Fury guys that I'm back friends with, anyways. Everybody, I don't hold any grudges against anyone, really. I wish everybody the best. I hope everyone has an amazing 2025. I hope AEW gets better in 2025 too, because I have noticed one thing. I'll say one last thing for the people. Like, I like complaining about AEW because to me it's interesting how bad the fall is, but we're actually at the point now where any video with the AEW title doesn't even get hits. People just don't care anymore. So I hope they can bring some interest back to the product and that the wrestling business. I'm hoping that once Raw gets on Netflix and SmackDown, maybe there'll be another resurgence because it's kind of been on a stale level since last WrestleMania. So I hope things like I wish everyone the best, including the wrestling industry, and hopefully also as far as UFO goes, hopefully there'll be finally some more government disclosure, like is promised from President Donald Trump as he takes over on January 20th. WWE Hall of Famer Donald Trump. Now he deserves it for hosting two of the WrestleManias, being involved in that angle with Vince McMahon and being a supporter of combat sports for so many years. So I'll check out. Thanks again to everybody from Hannibal. And next year, 2025, May, super crazy ECW Arena. I'm finally going to make my debut there, and it ain't going to be pretty.
Yes, fans, thank you very much for your continued support. I want to thank all of you for your positive responses to the interviews that I do, and of course, thank Hannibal for the opportunity again to do journalism on this channel. And I'd like to wish everyone and their families a happy new year. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and notification, and you will keep up on all the content that is coming your way. Until next time, I'm Jack Kilby. Thanks for tuning in.